him. Well, few Nigerian politicians are as popular and controversial as Ikenga Ugochinyere, the self-confident PDP member of the House of Representatives. He's never far from the news, but this time it seems he's in it for reasons he would much rather avoid. As you may have heard in the program, he's been removed as the lawmaker representing Idato North and South in IMO State by an elections petitions tribunal. The tribunal ruled that he was not validly nominated in the PDP's primary election that took place on February the 25th and has ordered the Electoral Commission INEC to conduct supplementary elections, ruling that Mr. Ugochinyere and his PDP party should be excluded from that ballot. They in turn argue that the tribunal's verdict is based on a mistaken interpretation of the law, and they've approached the appeals court to challenge the disqualification. Now, at this point, we were supposed to have the APC person here, and as I mentioned at the outset, he apparently had an emergency. They then subsequently offered us a lawyer from the APC, but that same lawyer had been on the morning show this morning, and we have a policy on a rise that we need to reflect a broad church of opinion. So it's not a good idea to have to replicate the same people on different programs on the same day. So I'm afraid we had to decline. But I certainly hope the APC gentleman, if he had an emergency, everything is all right. So, but fortunately for us, this is the part of the program where we dig a bit deeper behind the headlines, and we're delighted that our guest analyst is here to help us explore the stories and issues of the day. And today we have the journalist, political affairs commentator, and a Rise News analyst, Dr. Constance Ikokwu, who is always a favorite of audiences. How are you?
Very well, thanks, and you?
Not bad. Unfortunately, you have to analyze one half of the story.
I mean, I hope we can survive it.
No, I'm sure you'll do fine. But we heard that very robust sort of argument made by the lawyer there, Barrister Nwachukwu, who represents the PDP from IMO State. But it just does sound like a real muddle, doesn't it? I mean, not only a legal muddle, because both sides are arguing that, well, they've got the right of the legal rights, the right of it, but also just in terms of, I mean, the politics in that state. It
is very messy, but it's not only in IMO State. First of all, the lawyer was very detailed, and you could see that he is a lawyer. And coincidentally, Ugochinyere, who he is supporting, is also a lawyer. So these are knowledgeable and informed people. They're not just people from the streets, so they know what they're doing. It takes a lot of courage to be a politician in Nigeria. It also takes even more courage to jump into the fray and remain in the fray in spite of attacks and harassment. It's not easy. The young man I heard, his house was burnt down in the process. His mother was killed.
We've had him on this program several. We had him on when that happened to him.
So it's very tough.
His uncle was killed, not his mother. Yeah.
Well, okay, yeah. So it's very difficult. But here we are. The lawyer said a lot of things, and he took his time to unpack this particular case. I mean, he was a bit animated, but he was solid on all the issues that he mentioned. I think that the court cases are ubiquitous. I mean, if we thought that the elections in February generated a lot of schisms between different candidates, I think the tribunal case is even more so. And so it begs the question at this point, is this good for our democracy? Is it healthy for democracy? I mean, in an ideal situation, people or voters should determine their winners. But what we are seeing again and again is that the courts are beginning to decide more and more who is the winner. There are other similar cases in Benue State. Gabriel Suswam won his case. In Kogi State, Natasha Apoti won. She also had a running battle with the governor. Yes. In fact, I think during the elections, she had a car crash and she survived miraculously. In Abia State, in Nkiru Georgia, who is already a minister, also has won a case. I hear she might revert to the National Assembly. There's also a case in Kano State, Katsina State, in Delta. So it's all over the country. It's a lot of issues, it's a lot of problems, and I think that is something that we really need to look into as a country, whether this is the right way to proceed in a democratic setting.
Yes, that's a good point. But just returning specifically to the Ikenga Ugochinyere thing versus the other sort of parties in IMO State and the tribunal's decision, his people say the reason the primary, because I mean the argument is that, you know, the primary was not held where it should have been, and therefore it invalidates the candidate. But they say the reason that primary was held elsewhere was because of insecurity in Idato. And the PDP, they say, wrote to INEC informing the Commission of the insecurity in the constituency where the activities of gunslingers was prevalent. And that was the reason they held it in Owerri. Now, according to the PDP, the APC and the Labour Party challenged this in the Federal High Court, and the court held that the reason for moving the venue of the primary, which was because of insecurity, was legitimate and legal. The court also said that the APC and Labour don't have the legal locus or whatever to challenge the primary election of the PDP. They then went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the PDP won. So the election was then held, and the PDP also won. I mean, given all that, there seems to be some confidence on the part of the PDP going into the appeals.
Yeah, obviously, the guest was very confident. Ugochinyere himself, if you have listened to him talk on a couple of shows, not only in Arise, he was also confident that they will win at appeal. They have explained the situation very much so, that there was a reason that the election was not held in the location that it was supposed to take place. We are aware that there has been a very volatile situation in IMO State. I mean, they have had their fair share of problems before the governor came into power. But in 2019, when the Supreme Court decided to make Hope Uzodimma the governor of the state from the 3rd position in the polls, you know, lumping him into the 1st, I mean, a lot of people were very aggrieved, not only the PDP. There are other parties as well that felt that injustice had been done. And from that time onward, it had been a lot of violence. But apart from that, generally in the Southeast, we do know that for the past couple of years, 8 years, we had the challenge of the unknown gunmen, we had the challenge of the indigenous people of Biafra, we had all sorts of violence that, you know, literally people running amok and, you know, constituting themselves as a nuisance to the state. So in many parts of the South, there were problems with elections. So if this case was that there were insecurity in that area, it couldn't be held, okay, it sounds like a plausible argument. And then, of course, his opponents took him to court. The case had already gone to court and up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said they did the right thing. I do not understand why that case had to come back again to the tribunal. The lawyers, you know, might be able to explain it better. But the good thing is that they have the opportunity to go to the appeal court. However, it is not a good thing because it means that elections are becoming very expensive. You can imagine if you do not have the kind of money that is required to hire lawyers. It is not cheap by any standard. It also, what it does is it discourages people that are decent and sane and would want to join politics for good, people that are interested in the welfare of people. When you see all this madness that is going on, when you see all the confusion that is going on, you really do not want to jump into that. You do not want to be a part of that because you need to have a pot of money somewhere in order to be able to go through all this litigation. Some of them go on for periods of time, very long periods of time. So it's not an easy case, but it is what it is. So we'll see what happens at the appeal court.
But given what you're saying, I mean, it sounds like that governorship election in IMO State is going to be something to really worry about.
It is. I think it is concerning to a lot of people. I think the other thing is also the disenfranchisement of people. We're talking about this particular case. They said in over 55 polling units. Yes, elections did not hold. The PDP says it's because of insecurity. The APC says it's because materials did not arrive. Whoever is saying the truth, the point is that people did not vote in that area. I think in the governorship election that is coming up in IMO State, we might see similar situations because the security situation hasn't improved tremendously, and then it becomes worse during the elections because politicians want to win at all costs.
Absolutely, and many of them will be prepared, sadly, to disrupt the elections in places just to prevent the other person. If they don't think they might not be winning in those places, they're happy to disrupt the elections there so that no one gets the vote.
Exactly. It is unfortunate, but this is what we are seeing in this climb. The competition for power, the stakes that are very high, the limited resources that people are fighting for, because when you get into power, you have access to influence, you have access to power, and with that comes access to all sorts of things, including money, resources, and everything. So it is a tough situation, and we're hoping that they will be able to manage it in IMO State. I mean, it is an off-season election. That means there will be available military officials,
I mean, INEC
police
can marshal,
officials,
and the security forces can marshal all their resources to ensure that it goes properly. But just returning to that Electoral rerun and the decision of the tribunal, I understand that there have been big protests there in support of Ugochinyere, which suggests that he's got the public on his side.
The point to make here is that he's relatively young, right? It doesn't mean that the governor isn't young as well, but he is relatively young. He seems very strong and confident, and he really wants to help his people. That is the sense that you get speaking to him and speaking to other people around him. And then his opponent of the APC, I hear, won only one polling unit out of 340. So you want to understand why and how somebody who won so little, wants to be the person that, is declared as the winner of the entire election. Of course, given what has already happened in 2019 in the governorship election in that state, people are very frustrated and aggrieved. And that's also why when these kind of things happen, the implications are grave and severe. It means that at a point you find out that there will be indifference on the part of people. People, come to a point that they say, what is all this about? Why should I even go to the poll when my vote doesn't count? Why should I even go to the poll when the elections will be nullified and when my candidate is the right candidate? So we have to be careful, with what is going on, both at the political level and also in the courts. You do not want to have a democracy that is not a democracy in the real world or in the real sense. You want to encourage people to actually go out there and vote, and you want them to be the ones that determine their leaders and the people that win the election. So we're really, treading on a very slopey road here.
That's a good point. And I wonder why people like yourself, become political commentators, because you clearly, you enjoy doing political commentary, but you're also very critical of the processes and things, and one would think that you'd run a mile.
No, it is very interesting. It's a dynamic topic. Everything is political in society.
But you must be shocked at some of the things that you come across. It just, any reasonable, logical person who believes in the rule of law, would just be completely freaked out by the things that not only happen, but are allowed to happen officially in this country, politically.
Charles, I must say that I am shaken, but we have to do the job. But that also brings to the point that when people like you and me are sitting down here as journalists, we talk, we analyze, we report the news. A lot of our counterparts in the private sector have decided that politics is not a place they want to come into, or they don't want to be part of it because of things like this. And I begin to tell people, when you leave the space, we have been leaving the space for a very long time. When you leave the space, all sorts of charlatans, all sorts of human beings will fill it in. Nature abhors vacuum. So for so many years in Nigeria, we have left a vacuum. We're either running out of the country to go and stay in countries where they have done their own work and they have built their countries and they have set up everything, or we decide, no, I'm not going to be part of it. Well, you need not complain, or you do not have the right to complain, because you have left the space for other people who should not be there. So I think that when we discuss things like this, part of the things that gives me the confidence and the joy to continue is to encourage people to say, you know what, you are part of this country. This is your country. You have to do something. You cannot leave it alone for people who should not be there.
And on that note, I want to thank you, Dr. Constance Ikokwu. Really good talking with you. She is, of course, a journalist, political affairs commentator, and a Rise News analyst. Thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome, Charles.
That's it for this edition of Arise Prime Time. Join us again tomorrow. From me and the entire team here in Abuja, bye-bye, and thank you for watching.